Previously, a confused Talk got a close and personal look at the utter dysfunction that's Fate's folly. He took a closer look at Tornak's body as Taria watched him warily, and he was quite disappointed to realize that Tornak was magically protected from becoming one of his gardens. Sean and Keelan had a half-talk, half-argument before Sean finally told him that Yara and Enola had been taken by Praetors as well, but were now prisoners of the prophetess and her kobolds. She gave him a brief rundown of everything the group had learned from Taki and their new, tag-along. Meanwhile, Oz and Zaya had a talk in his tent. Oz told her that he knew he was a monster. He'd been selfish, not telling her about him being a praetor because he didn't want her to realize just what he was. Zaya told him that she didn't trust him quite as unconditionally as she had before, but they could fix it. Eventually. Outside, Taria spent some time casting several rituals involving her owl otter, while Keelan stared at the odd creature in confusion. Sean told him that was something Taria did now, apparently. Keelan then decided the better part of valor is discretion. He then took Sean over to talk to properly introduce them and see what he knew about the whole kobold situation. There may have also been some threatening of the prophetess following kobold that involved alligators. Around that time, Zaya stepped out of Oz's tent. She told the group that Oz would be willing to answer some questions, but if they asked too many of the wrong type, then they'd have to answer to her. Keelan asked Oz if it was true. Oz knew what he meant and said that yes, he had been a praetor. Keelan told him that Oz knew he distrusted praetors, but he still trusted Oz. Taria asked Oz a few questions as well, making it clear that she would never forgive him. But she thought she could trust him. The group moved on to talking about what their plans were for rescuing Yara and Enola. Zaya reached out to Aki via sending, and she confirmed that the original plan was still in place. She didn't have any way of resurrecting someone, but they could all learn from, and then the spell cut off because, DMs are like that. Taria was very disappointed to hear that Aki couldn't bring Tornak back. Zaya brought up the kobold who worshipped the prophetess and asked what they should do with him. He tried to make a run for it, but Keelan sent his alligator and Sava after him. Oz tied him up, while Sean and Keelan made a few mild threats on his life. Taki filled the group in on what the plan was, clearly thinking they were going to join in the main assault. Keelan suggested that the group might sneak in from behind instead, while Aki and the kobolds drew the prophetess's attention. It would just depend on how things went. More on that in a bit. And then the group set back out into the swamp, this time with Waterwalk on them thanks to Talk. The travel went surprisingly well. They managed to avoid a number of praetors, and nothing horrible happened to any of them. Keelan even found a relatively hidden place for them to camp for the night. Once they'd stopped for the night, Sean reached out to Yara with sending to see if she and Enola were still in one piece, and if they had any of their belongings with them, so that she could magically search for them when they got closer to the camp. Yara told her that they still had their robes and shawls. The prophetess was insane, though, so they had some concerns. Sean filled the group in on that bit of information, although it wasn't particularly surprising to hear. Taria took first watch and spent the entirety of it using Speak with Animals to talk with Sava about Keelan and forgetting about the whole, keeping watch part. More on that in a minute as well. Oz took the last watch, and Keelan had finished his trance by that point. The two of them talked for a bit about the praetor reveal before Oz went to work on breakfast. He was distracted, though, and he burned it. The smell of burning food drew the attention of the dozens, if not hundreds, of kobolds that were camped nearby that Taria had missed noticing during her watch. As they rushed towards the camp, Taria and Zaya disguised themselves as taller than usual kobolds who had taken the others prisoner. Sean also hurriedly cast tongues on herself so that she could understand what was being said, since, most of them were speaking in Draconic. The kobolds clearly followed the prophetess, and their leader, Skrin, was skeptical of Taria's story. She claimed to have lost her amulet that proves she followed the prophetess to a praetor, and she claimed that the same praetor cut out Zaya's tongue to explain why she wasn't talking, which was actually because she didn't speak Draconic. Taria managed to convince them, though, so the kobolds took the rest of the group prisoner. Realizing there was no chance they were getting away, Keelan froze the mouth shut of the prophetess-worshipping kobold they had with them. Then Talk slowly poisoned him to death while he couldn't scream, so that by the time the kobolds got to them with manacles, there was only a body left. Zaya and Sean managed to make it so that the manacles around Sean's wrist weren't actually locked without the kobolds noticing, but Keelan, Oz, and Talk were all manacled. Talk pulled Skrin aside to tell him that he was known to the prophetess as a traitor, though, so Skrin kept him at the front to verify with the prophetess that he wasn't actually an enemy. Oz carried Tornek's body as Taria managed to convince Skrin that the prophetess could bring Tornek back to life to show her power. They were taken to the prophetess's camp in an abandoned temple where a service of some type was taking place. There was a dead body at the front that Sean recognized as being that of Dagon Rain, and the prophetess was clearly trying to bring him back to life. Talk could tell that she had the magic to do so, but she clearly didn't know how the spell worked, as she didn't have the material components needed, nor was she doing any type of ritual. The prophetess decided that Dagon Rain had bad blood. She needed good blood. She pointed towards Yara and Enola, saying they would kill them and then she would bring them back. Around that point, the prophetess noticed the group in the doorway. She told the kobolds to free Talk since she knew him. A somewhat panicking Taria suggested that Tornek was good blood, and the prophetess decided she would try to bring him back. She told them to bring Tornek's body to her, and Oz took his time putting him down and unwrapping the body. Talk asked for permission to approach. As he got closer to the prophetess, he told her that he thought her resurrection spell was still in progress and just hadn't had time to kick in yet. Then, the moment he was within 10 feet, he used his spores to turn the body of Dagon Rain into a zombie. As you do. And that is where we left off.